Well, thanks very much for our guests and the audience for logging in today to this absolutely fabulous forum of experts that's been collected together by Gulf Intelligence. I'd like to get quickly to our panel with a few brief introductions. Firstly, I'd like to introduce Kate Dourian, someone who, to many calling into this, is very well known with a very storied career in energy and international journalism in the Middle East, currently contributing editor to Middle East Economic Survey. Then our next panelist, Laury Haytayan, MENA Director at National Resource Governance Institute. And then finally, Mehmet Öğütçü, Group CEO, Global Resources Partnership and Chairman of the London Energy Club. Well, welcome everyone. Kate, I'm going to come straight to you, and I'm going to, come to you on this question of Iran. We've had mass demonstrations over the last few months in Iran, very unsettling in terms of how the regime has handled that. It's raised a lot of questions about the longevity of the regime and its relationship with neighbours in the Gulf. We also have this question of the nuclearization of Iran that won't go away. And we also, have this lingering question that will eventually need to be answered over who succeeds the Supreme Leader, Ali Khamenei. I mean, how do you see that relationship and that issue developing over this year?
I mean, the answers to a lot of these questions lie in Washington, really, and maybe a little bit in Europe. But, we're so preoccupied at the moment with the Ukraine crisis. We're seeing more yes, there is opposition to the regime, and it's not just the morality police in Iran. It's actually against Khamenei himself, which is unusual because, previous protests have been against, presidents, but not the Supreme Leader. But, as to what comes next, it's probably going to, the most likely is that the Islamic Revolutionary Guards will take over because they are the most powerful force in there. They've got hands in everything. I mean, they have tentacles in the economy and in security, military. They're actually more powerful than the army. So I think that would be probably the outcome. So, we've seen a breakdown in, there had been negotiations in Iraq between Saudi Arabia and Iran. That doesn't seem to have gone anywhere. I think the protests will probably continue, but there is a lot of repression, people being put to death. It doesn't look as if the regime is about to fall immediately, but it's obviously, a geopolitical risk. The Israeli very right-wing government at the moment, looking at Iran. But again, I don't think the United States at this present time is interested in seeing another war break out. So I think they will try to hold Netanyahu back from taking any action that would inflame masses in the Middle East. So I think that's about where it stands at the moment.
If I can just take that question to you, Laury. I mean, especially specifically with Iran, what interests me is Russia and how Iran has moved closer to Russia. And there seems to be this competition, especially in the Gulf at the moment, to kind of nudge closer to Russia. You have the Arab Gulf states, which have obviously aligned themselves to Russia economically through OPEC in some way, although they are staying back from any kind of support to what's happening in Ukraine. But certainly in the OPEC environment, these Arab Gulf states are very aligned to Russia, it seems, at the moment in terms of policy, oil output, etc. And then you have Iran, which is actively getting involved in terms of weapons transfers, etc. How do you see Russia coming into this equation?
Definitely, what you're saying is very correct. What you're seeing is like Iran has been very open about the support to Russia and with the drones that they have sent. And so Iran is implicated in the war with Russia. And this, I think, is one of the red lines for the US about the future of JCPOA, etc., because that is like direct involvement of Iran. And this might be one additional issue to kill the JCPOA and the future of negotiations. But at the same time, you see that for the GCC countries, it's like the balancing act of we are there, we want to talk to everyone, our interests come first, and oil issues are very important because if we are under pressure about energy transition, if we are under pressure that this oil revenues will not last, we need now to secure all the money we need so that we can move into energy transition. So it is more about like how to maintain the prices to a certain level that they will help the Gulf countries get the revenues to continue with the pledges on net zero, etc. All of that. So it's a different dynamics, if you want, between what GCC is trying to do with Russia and what definitely Iran is doing with Russia. Definitely Iran eyes is on that collaboration and cooperation agreement that they've signed with the Russian companies, about the Russian companies helping Iran in its gas sector, because they see a lot of potential in the future where Russia is not going to be the one providing gas to Europe. So for Iran, they want to develop their gas sector. Russia is the one that is that promised to help. So that is what they're trying to do, alienating everyone, ready to kind of, if you want, burn bridges to get to that if you want support from Russia. But definitely there will have what's happening internally in Iran is interesting, because it can go to different places. It can either go to Iran compromising, the way we saw in Lebanon with the collapse of the economic situation in Lebanon. Hezbollah made a deal with Israel. It didn't go into the other direction of really being more aggressive, extreme. So that could be one thing that we could see in Iran. Either they can go very conservative, very rigid, very extreme, or that could be one place to have compromises. Again, that goes back to what if we want, what the US wants. Does the US wants at this stage to compromise, to work with the Iranians and get a deal the same way that they've done with Lebanon and Israel? They saw an opportunity, they went after it, even if it was Hezbollah who was leading these negotiations indirectly. So definitely different dynamics between Iran and the GCC, and why there is this kind of collaboration, if you want, with Russia.
And Mehmet, if I can come to you on that, I mean, it's interesting, both Kate and Laury, what they've kind of spelled out there. It seems that there's a twin, there's two paths Iran can go. One, a kind of off-ramp situation, more normalization of relations, more integration. I think we're a long way off any resolution in terms of JCPOA. But then, the other side, as Kate mentioned, that the Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, he's not getting any younger. There has been a lot of questions over his health. What comes after is open for debate. Kate mentioned, this possibility that the IRGC would take over. That would see, an even more hardline Iran in the regional and international context. I mean, how much of a concern for countries like Turkey in the region is this? Especially, there are so many hotspots where these two countries can bump heads together, whether that's Syria or on direct border issues.
Yes, I mean, as you say, Iran is in a critical position this year, and going forward in 2023, we'll see many interesting developments taking place. Both domestically, this unrest, there is no way that it will stop. It looks that not only the domestic unrest emanating from the death of Mahsa Amini, but also because of the growing international isolationism, because Iran will be moving inch by inch further towards Russia, further towards China, because there is no prospect that Iran could normalize relations with the West. And as you said in the interview, the nuclear deal is almost dead. So there is no prospect it's coming back in the foreseeable future. Therefore, there will be more economic hardships. I don't think that all this, hundreds of billions of dollars of deals with Russia and China will in fact work. These are on paper, most of them. And Iranians are not happy with these arrangements with Chinese and Russians either. They are looking for more international engagement, and it's going to be not there. From the Turkish perspective, the greater instability in Iran will not be in Turkish interest either, because there's also there now and more Azeri and Kurdish separatist movement gaining strength in Iran. That means straining relations with Azerbaijan, as well as with Iraq and Turkey somehow. I don't think that Turks and Iranians are working together to contain the Kurdish separatism between themselves. But Turkey and Iran have been quite, how to say, condemned to their geography since Castro-Shirin agreement. So there has been no change on the border. Both of them are regional powers. Now, both of them also increasingly isolated, although Turkey has probably better ways of engagement with the West, Russia, China on a more equal basis, perhaps, than Iranians are. But the fact that Caspian Sea now is being revived, another area of cooperation between Russia and Iran, whereas Turkey is trying to bring the Turkmen gas across Caspian in collaboration with Turkmenistan and Azerbaijan. There will be strong opposition from Russia and Iran coming to that, of course. Then Iran has become a permanent member of Shanghai Cooperation Organization, while Turkey is only an observer right now, and being a NATO member and associated with EU, Council of Europe, of course, OECD, nobody's expecting Turkey to join Shanghai Cooperation Organization. But it shows that Iran is probably making strenuous efforts to cement ties with China and Russia in the face of West challenging Iran. The extreme right and religious coalition in Israel, Netanyahu in his sixth government, may create greater havoc in the region with Iran, even with Turkey perhaps, because there is a rapprochement taking place over the past year between Turkey and Israel, and things have evolved, and at every level now they are talking. Turkey is also starting to talk, with some help from Russia, with Syrians. Both Turkish intelligence chief as well as the Minister of Defense were in contact with Syrian counterparts in Moscow. So this is some also game-changing development in the region after a series of attempts Turkey has made in relations with Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Egypt, then Israel. So there's a re-engagement strategy of Turkey in the region. Actually, this will be at the detriment of Iran to a certain extent.
Mehmet, let me pause you on that re-engagement issue, and I want to bring it back to you, Kate, for something that you mentioned in terms of the government change in Israel and the impact that is going to have on regional geopolitics this year and going forward. Of course, we have now a right-wing government under Benjamin Netanyahu, some would say a hardline government. How does this affect some of these relationships that have been built over the last few years between Israel and primarily the Arab Gulf states? How will it affect Israel's relationship with Iran? How Israel deals with Iran going forward? What risks and what benefits can we see potentially over the next 2 years?
I mean, it's not a very strong coalition, let's say. It was sort of a marriage of convenience, and a lot of people don't really expect this government to last. So if you look at the allocation of portfolios, the foreign minister is going to be, they're going to swap after 1 year. So even the ministers themselves don't really expect this government to last. But I think if you look at the relationship, it differs. I mean, you have the economic side, the energy side, for example, between Egypt and Israel, and the whole gas issue. The East Med has become sort of this new gas hub, more LNG flow into Europe from Egypt. It's basically Israeli gas. So I think you have to separate, and obviously the UAE is also interested. They've got stakes in Israeli offshore gas. So I think for now, they're not sort of allowing the politics to get in the way of that normalization. You've got Morocco going very strongly in the direction of Israel, improving ties on military, technology, all kinds of things. And even here in the UAE, on food security. So I think you've got this separation between economic interests that are mutual to these countries that have normalized, and at the same time, the politics, which I think we have to wait and see how it develops. But I think they will all agree that, with the US sort of seemingly disengaging from the region, Israel is a good ally to have, because they still see Iran as a much bigger threat. The Gulf states see Iran as a much bigger threat. They're trying to extricate Iraq from Iran's clutches, which they, since the US-led invasion, Iran has had a much bigger, and they are now looking to invest even more in Iraq. So I think there's this sort of dynamic playing out, but I think it's just a wait and see attitude. They're probably hoping that this government will collapse, because it's going to put a lot of these Arab capitals in a very, very awkward position. Because if you have a more repressive, I mean, we're already seeing, you know, the expansion of settlements being talked about by Netanyahu, a very sort of, you know, much more anti-Palestinian stance by the coalition partners. So I think it's going to be very difficult to sort of stand back and not get involved. But I think they're just hoping that, yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, what can Abu Dhabi and Riyadh do if you know, we see more of, you know, what you mentioned in Israel that you know, really does put you know, the rulers in the UAE and Saudi Arabia in awkward positions in terms of how they respond? I mean, you know, could you see the collapse of the Abraham Accords? Could you see, you know, Saudi Arabia return to where we were maybe 10 years ago in terms of its view of Israel in the region?
I think it's wait and see. I don't think it'll lead to a collapse of the Abraham Accords. I mean, if you listen to what the UAE officials have said, it's, you know, the reason why they think it's a good idea to have relations with Israel is that they can have influence over policy. It remains to be seen whether that actually is true. But I frankly don't think so. I think Netanyahu has to answer to his coalition partners. I don't think he's going to be influenced by again, Washington maybe, but you know, not under the Biden administration. I think relations are going to be quite difficult because you know, they have been in the past with the previous Netanyahu administration.
Laury, from your perspective, I mean, in Lebanon, how is this viewed? How is the closeness now, in some respects, of specifically these very powerful, influential Arab Gulf states to Israel on many issues, and also the establishment of this new government under Netanyahu and some of the things that we see happening there in Israel at the moment? How concerning is that?
Look, I think Lebanon has so many problems to deal with. And the country has been collapsing since 2019. And the establishment there is trying to see how they can benefit from this collapse and the threat of the collapse with the international community, with the US. So as I said, they struck a deal. They struck a deal with Israel on the maritime border issues, and therefore, and now Total is back on track to do some drilling activities in 2023. The same with the European Union. They're trying to see like how to get advantage of the collapse, saying that if we collapse, then the refugees will flow. It's not only the Syrian refugees that we have, but again, like the Lebanese refugees, the new ones that are fleeing the country, etc. So the Lebanese government, actually, as weak as they are, they're very opportunistic, and they're looking into opportunities everywhere to survive. So for them, the Israeli government, on the contrary, could be a good thing, because then Hezbollah can really position itself as the defender of the Lebanese in case anything happens, or even for to bring back that idea of defending the Palestinian cause, etc. Because what we're seeing today is like two paths for the Israeli government. So there is the internal issue and the Palestinian issue that they're very extreme on, and we've seen already the new minister Ben Gvir going to these religious sites, creating some tension, etc. Internally, not only the Palestinian citizens, but even for the Israelis, they're very concerned about what the track is. So there is that internal Palestinian factor that, again, Hezbollah could take advantage of. At the same time, there is the Iranian factor, how they will react to anything going to dealing with Iran. And again, that will again.
Do you see Hezbollah starting to change its strategy and becoming more aggressive in terms of its response to Israel again?
So look, if that serves the purpose of them being really strong in the country, and especially with this, now we have the election, the presidential election. So that if that will serve them, they play that card. So that's why I think for Beirut, and especially for Hezbollah, for Dahieh, it is good news to have this Israeli government. It's not, on the contrary, they will abuse it to the extreme, to really impose themselves in the country and impose a president that goes along the politics of Hezbollah. So this is how they see it. They don't see it a threat at all. They see it as an opportunity.
So, Mehmet, in Turkey, again, another incredibly influential country in the region that has presidential elections this year. How do you see Erdogan's position going into that? Unassailable. He seems to be in a very strong position at the moment. What do you predict there?
Well, as you say, Turkey is the largest country in the region to reckon with. Therefore, any geopolitical dynamic in Turkey will affect all the countries in the region. And the general assumption was Erdogan, after 22 years of ruling the country, might be stepping down at this election, losing it actually, not voluntarily stepping down. But now it looks that the opposition is not a credible force to reckon with, because there is a table of 6 opposition parties having difficulty converging policies and presenting a credible also presidential candidate. However, the economic difficulties and the foreign policy failures of the past and Turkey's isolation in the West and also fragile relationship with the rest of the world, although it's the largest country in the region, is giving some sense to the voters that he might be perhaps pushed outside the political spectrum. But there is a concern that even if there is a strong wish by the voters, he may not go willingly from the power. So we'll see how strong Turkish democracy is. But right now, there is not a credible opposition candidate to beat him. Perhaps we'll see in the next few weeks. Perhaps they are making such a decision. The difficulty is that this is a democracy experiment, actually. 6 different parties from different parts of the political spectrum coming together and forming a government policy and joint candidate, whether it's going to be Kılıçdaroğlu, CHP leader, or one of the mayors who beat Erdogan's candidates in the local elections, or someone else unexpectedly coming to the picture. So they are waiting for the election date to be announced. Normally it should be on 13 June, but it looks that Erdogan would like to do it a bit earlier, in May probably, so that he will also bypass this constitutional bottleneck, which may prevent him, legally speaking, from running again. So I don't think that there will be this problem, because the higher election board will always favor him. However, there are so many uncertainties, but it's not a foregone conclusion that Erdogan will lose this election, as opposition is talking about it. So he is a political strategist. He has won so many elections in the past, but this time I think economic vulnerabilities affecting all the social stratas of the country may perhaps not tolerate another Erdogan term. So we shall see. If he wins, of course, there will be a different Turkey. If he loses, whether the new coalition will be able to pull together a powerful alternative to him and change the foreign policy, economic model, and transparency, accountability, corruption, relations with the West and the countries in the region. We don't know much about their policies, how they are going to recalibrate. So there are, I think, in 2023, Turkey is one of the question marks, how Turkey will be evolving. And also, of course, I mean, the fact that we are discussing this geopolitical risks facing us in 2023 is very important, because energy and geopolitics could never be treated in isolation from one another. So whatever developments are taking place in China, Russia, India, Iran, Israel, EastMed, all of them will affect our energy outlook as well, as the title of this meeting is.
Sort of building on that point around, around energy. I mean, a lot isn't talked about around the impacts of inflation, food inflation across the Middle East. Of course, if you wind back to 2009, 2010, Arab Spring was a political shockwave that was caused by food inflation in North Africa at the time and spread across the region. We have the oil price environment is volatile, obviously critical to the economies across the region, and that filters down throughout the Middle East. Do you see some of the sort of economic fermentation linked to inflation, linked to the concerns over global recession. You have the IMF now predicting a third of the world could go into recession in 2023. Can you see that having political ramifications in the region, you know, maybe similar to what we saw back in 2010, or have we moved on a long way from there?
No, I don't think we've moved on, because what you see in the Middle East, you know, is a sort of dual track growth. You've got the oil-producing, oil-exporting countries, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, sort of windfall revenues, but at the same time, and Iraq as well. But at the same time, you've got countries like Egypt, which are suffering. I mean, if you look at Egypt, the inflation rate is double digits. You know, it's above 20%. So you've got the Gulf states are actually trying to buy sort of security in their allied in countries that are their allies, like Egypt. You know, they poured billions of dollars into Egypt. So I think, and as the sort of, we've seen oil prices are now coming down. Okay, there are analysts and projections that it might go above 100, you know, sort of sometime later this year. But at the moment, it's sort of around the 80 level, which is not really going to generate any windfalls, because if you look at some of the budgets that are being announced, there's a lot of spending going on as well. So I think this, yes, I mean, the economy, as Mehmet said, you know, Turkey has been suffering economically. I think there is a risk because of the weakness of the trading partners. You know, I mean, China hasn't opened up fully yet. If it does, that's going to have a huge impact, particularly on the Middle Eastern countries. But, you know, you've got interest rates going up, you've got inflationary pressures, you've got slowdown of the economies of the industrialized countries, if you look at the latest World Bank projections. So I think that's going to have an impact, because at the end of the day, it is a globalized world. But we're also seeing more sort of more protectionism, more sort of looking internally, trying to sort of secure. You know, you look at countries like Algeria, which has been saved by the sort of higher gas prices, more interest. So I think there is a dual track. But you know, I was in Washington a few months ago, and I was talking to, you know, taxi drivers, a lot of them Ethiopians, and they're saying, you know, the world is not really looking at some of the crises that are, you know, except for Ukraine. You've got Yemen, you've got starvation, you've got, you know, hunger, you've got quite a lot of other issues. Libya is still sort of, you know, in political limbo. You've got, you know, Lebanon also having its own issues. So I think there's a lot of tensions within the region. And, you know, the Gulf states can support countries like Egypt, but not, you know, but it's going to come at a cost, because the market in 2020 was so disrupted that it's very difficult to sort of look ahead.
Do you see that you know, the UAE and Saudi Arabia, you know, the new you know, Umayyads and Abbasids, these great almost sort of titans of the region in terms of their wealth, their oil wealth, their political zeal to get things done? You have a reinvigorated leadership in Saudi Arabia under the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, obviously Mohammed bin Zayed now in Abu Dhabi. Dramatic change. We've always seen dramatic change in the Gulf, but they seem more keen to intervene, to be active on the international stage, to be big global players. I think Mohammed bin Salman's talked about the Gulf region as being the new Europe. Do you see them being prepared to bankroll all of this, to hold things together from that perspective, to be interventionist?
Sorry to intervene. We have 2 minutes left to wrap up. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, we saw what happened in Yemen. You know, they did intervene in Yemen, then the UAE pulled out. I mean, it's still a mess in Yemen. You know, the Houthis are still in control. So I think, yes, they are feeling, as Rad said, they are feeling more assertive. You know, there is more demand for oil at the moment, but it's not going to last. So I think they're going to have to tailor their policies, and they are starting to. You know, there's more investment in renewables, in green hydrogen, and so on. So I think that's, you know, it's been a wake-up call, but at the same time, for now, it's sort of a very short-term bump in demand for oil, and I think they are feeling that they are in the driver's seat at the moment.
So just to wrap up then, Laury, I'm going to come to you, and I'm going to go to all the panel here. 2023, you know, what's the big outlier that we're not, that no one's really talking about? I mean, Kate, you alluded to it a little bit in your answer there, but you know, what aren't we seeing in terms of geopolitics in the Middle East that we should be really concerned about in 2023? Laury, over to you.
I think that this will be a continuation of the problems that we have. So we have problems from between Morocco, Algeria. Libya is in the freezer now because no one is interested in steering the pot there. But any moment, Turkey, Russia can decide like to move their problems into Libya, and then you have all these barrels that could stop at any moment, etc. Then you have Egypt. You have to look deeper into Egypt. Egypt is having economic problems. It could collapse. Egypt collapsing, it's like 100 million people. It's not like Lebanon collapsing 4 million people. So that is a big thing to look out for. Again, the Israel and what's happening in the Levant with Israel, Lebanon, Syria, all of that, again, it's very important. And then you go to Iran, what's happening in Iran, and then the GCC countries, I guess, they are trying as much as they can, especially Saudi Arabia, to put their effort into diversification, into diversifying their economy. This is the main concern of the GCC because of the energy transition portfolio, because going, if you want, going into that path requires a lot of diversification. One thing I think this year for the GCC will be the whole year of the COP28, and everybody will be interested in that. And it's very interesting to see how Saudi Arabia and the UAE will lead on the agenda of the COP28 and bring back this duality between, yes, we can still produce oil and gas, but at the same time, we can still put money in energy transition and make it happen. So this will
Mehmet, over to you. 2023, the big risk that we're not seeing in the Middle East.
Well, I think, first of all, the greater conflict or confrontation we will see between US and China, not only in 2023, but beyond that, I think will affect us. So we have to keep in mind that China and US will continue to confront each other. And on whose side we will be, I think this will be a question for many countries in the Middle East. Secondly, zero COVID strategy in China failed now, and it's going to have serious implications this year for all of us, because now millions of Chinese will be traveling around the world. Turkish election, we have to keep a watch on that. It will affect the whole region. And water, food security, as important as the energy security, will be coming as a collaboration and conflict area for, I think, most of us. And politicization of globalization or deglobalization, economic nationalism, rise of extremism in every part of the world.
We asked for one and you gave us 5.
Keep going on.
Final point for you, Kate. Is there anything that you'd like to add to your? I thought that you gave a very good answer in terms of Egypt, which I would agree with. I could see it as being absolutely a flashpoint in terms of some of the economic problems. But anything further to that?
I don't think Egypt will be allowed to collapse. I think, but there is going to be a lot of. I mean, we could be staring at another Arab winter because of the economic stresses in several countries. And you can only buy so much safety and security by pouring billions into it.
Great. Thank you so much, panel. I think that's a great way to end. Will we see an Arab winter in 2023? Inflation, uncertain oil price environment, lots of political uncertainty around the edges, and you have these fragile Middle East economies around that sort of that heart, that oil-rich heart in the Gulf. Can it continue to underwrite these fragile economies? Lots of questions there, lots of concerns, lots of geopolitical issues that undoubtedly we'll come back to throughout 2023. Thank you, panel. You've been fantastic. Thank you, Gulf Intelligence, for hosting this very important forum and giving us the opportunity to talk over these issues. And I think I've hit my target there. We finished on time.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you.
Take care. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.